Well, here we are at the very last session of Unified English Braille for Vision Professionals. Session 12 is going to focus on code switching and scansion, stress, and tone. There are certain situations where we might want to do some code switching, meaning stop using the symbols as UEB symbols and use them as some other code, such as foreign languages, the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA for short, music code, Nemeth or any other math or science or computer code in other countries, historical Braille codes, EBAE is now a historical Braille code now, and any proposed future Braille codes. So those might be situations where we need to switch out of dot configurations, meaning UEB contractions or symbols or what have you, into meaning something else for a different code. We should use the code switch indicators when the context and format are not enough to make it clear a code other than UEB is being used. Often formatting itself will be enough. We don't need to do these code switching things. But it's recommended that we should use code switches especially when Braille will be in an electronic format, such as a Braille refreshable display, or translated into print. BANA is working out the details of when and how all this code switching will work in United States and Canadian transcriptions. Usage with foreign language text is especially unknown right now in November 2016 because foreign language guidelines are being worked out probably right now as I speak. So the examples shown in the UEB codebook may or may not be relevant once those guidelines come out, especially since BANA has said that in English context, not studying a foreign language, but in English context with random foreign language stuck in there, we can use contractions, whereas UEB says don't. So that right there is going to make a difference. So just understand that the examples borrowed from the codebook, which I'm going to be showing you, should be understood to be in a literary context and not in, say, a math or science textbook or French 101. Okay, we have certain code switch indicators. There are word indicators and passage indicators. Now, all along we've had, for indicators, say typeform indicators, capital indicators, that sort of thing. We've had symbol, word, passage indicators. With the code switches, we only have word and passage indicators. There are no symbol indicators. And as far as I can tell, they don't follow any sort of pattern, or certainly not the pattern that we have been learning all along. I'm not quite sure why that is, but these are symbols that we should take note of because they are rather unusual. So we have non-UEB word indicators, indicator, and then a terminator, and then a passage indicator and a terminator. There's a little note in the rulebook that says the opening non-UEB passage indicator is actually two symbols. This also goes against everything that we've studied so far, where certain symbols were considered a unit. You couldn't break them apart. The one exception, I believe this is the only exception, is this opening non-UEB passage indicator. So the dot 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, that's one part of it, and then it's followed by a dot 3. The reason for this will become evident in just a moment. Just to let you know, there is a long list of symbols used in section 14, which is dealing with code switching. And it looks like it looks like something that you have to memorize. You don't. It's basically a special symbols list for you, the person looking something up. They're not new symbols, they're just symbols gathered from various codes because they were used in the examples. So if you're not familiar with, say, British chemistry or French, you can go to this list and see what those symbols are. That's all it is. It's not something that you have to learn or memorize. Be aware that those symbols are listed in Braille, Braille order, not categorically. So it's not like all the Nemeth signs are grouped together and all the French signs are grouped together. It's in Braille order and all mixed up. So look it up according to Braille order. The non-UEB word and passage indicators work very similar to typeform indicators. For instance, if we have a German phrase, for alongside of, use whatever that German word is. So we have just the word indicator. It's one symbol sequence, so we're using the non-UEB word indicator there for that. Dots 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. We don't, and then we need to terminate it because of the parenthesis there. So we have the closing non-UEB word indicator there after that German word. Then we have an example from French, and we have 3 symbol sequences there, E's with accent marks above them. So that's 3 symbol sequences. That means it's a passage. And then we have a single E with another accent mark above it. So that's just a word. That's a single symbol sequence. So because we have 3 symbol sequences for the first set of 3 E's there, we're going to use the non-UEB passage indicator. And remember, we always have to close passages. So we have the non-UEB passage terminator there as well. Then just the word and regular UEB. And then our non-UEB word indicator for the last E with an accent, and it's Braille with dots 1, 2, 4, 6. If there's more than one non-UEB Braille code that's used in a text and you need to identify which is which, you insert 2 or 3 identifying letters, no contractions, before the dot 3 of the opening indicator. So we don't just use any 2 or 3 letters that look nice to us. There is a official list. It's an international list on the web. And so the website given in the rulebook is obsolete, it's broken, it doesn't work. So use this one here on the screen if you want to look something up. I believe it changes every year, but the link should work to get to that page. So, and also, just as an aside, there are 3 different types of lists. So the one that is designated as 639-3 is the one that you want. That's the most complete one. So if you go there for a list of letters coded to, I think, all the languages in the world, that's where you go for that. And this is where that note about having the 2 components of the non-UEB passage indicator come into play. So here is where we have French. So we split up that indicator, dots 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Then we stick in our identifier, FR for French. We got that from the website. And then dot 3. So that whole thing then is the identifier for the non-UEB code. Or if we have German, again, we're not going to just guess and say, oh, I like G or GER. We can't use contractions. We use the designation from this website, and it's for Deutsch, so DE. So our non-UEB passage indicator has an additional component of the DE in there. Identifiers are not used with the non-UEB word indicator. We don't split up the word indicator. It only works with a passage indicator, even if it's only for one symbol sequence. So if you need to identify a word, you still use the passage indicator even though it's only one symbol sequence and not 3 or more. When more than one non-UEB Braille code is used in a text, identifiers are not needed if its meaning is obvious or if it refers to the same code as the previous non-UEB passage within the paragraph. So you only need to identify a non-UEB code once in a passage or paragraph or chunk of text. Here's an example where we're just kind of pretending that other non-UEB codes have been used. And so we do need to identify the Greek language in this sentence. So we have a sentence here with some Greek letters in parentheses. And we just use regular UEB up until then. Then we have our parenthesis for that first Greek phrase. Our non-UEB passage indicator, the first component of it, we're identifying it as GR because supposedly there are other non-UEB codes being used in this whole passage. So we want to say, okay, now we were talking about something else before, now we're talking about Greek. And then we have our dot 3 to complete our non-UEB passage indicator. Notice that there's no space then between that and the actual Greek that follows. So then we have some Greek, and then of course our closing non-UEB passage indicator. It's a passage, so even though it's only 2 symbol sequences, we still need to terminate it, just like we would any other passage. The next time the Greek comes along, though, we don't need to say Greek. We can just use the word indicator there, the non-UEB word indicator, because we have 2 words. So we use the non-UEB word indicator there, the first Greek word, and then say the non-UEB word indicator again for the second Greek word, and then we are terminating it there after that second word, because we're done now with Greek. If you have multiple non-UEB passages, then you need to close one and start the other. So you don't just keep opening up new codes. You have to close one before you start the next one. So here's an example with 3 different languages, the same sentence in 3 different languages. And so we have the first one in just regular UEB because that's English, and then we have our Afrikaans language there with that AF identifier within the UEB, non-UEB passage indicator, and then DE again for Deutsch, for German, for the German phrase. Notice again that we have to terminate our passages. When the non-UEB text is displayed, the non-UEB passage indicators may be on a line by themselves. Just like we had dot locator for use, they could be on a line all by itself. So we have our non-UEB passage indicator on a line by itself over on the left margin, and then the British chemistry formula there, and then closing it also on a line by itself with the non-UEB passage terminator. Except in the previous instance, where something is displayed, you place the non-UEB indicators at the exact point of change, unspaced from the symbol sequence, as we saw in about 2 slides previous. When a non-UEB code provides a symbol for switching out of that code, use that symbol in preference to the non-UEB word terminator or the closing non-UEB passage indicator. So, for instance, Nemeth or computer Braille code would have has its own termination symbol. So we would use that instead of the non-UEB terminators. So here's an example with BANA, our computer Braille code. So we have the sentence there, the capital letters ROM and RAM, and then when and RAME do as the Ramans do. I don't know, they're making up words. So we have in the second line of SimBraille there, we have the non-UEB word indicator for the ROM. And then we have, again, a non-UEB word indicator for RAM. And then down below, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, we have, at the beginning there, we have the non-UEB passage indicator, because we're dealing with more than 3 symbol sequences in computer Braille code. And then we terminate it then at the last line of SimBraille there. You see that it's terminated with dots 456.156. That's the computer Braille code terminator sign from that code. It's not the non-UEB passage terminator. And here's a crazy rule that it's very complicated, but it's there in the code book, and I promised I would take you through the entire code book, so here it is. Hopefully we don't have to ever deal with this though. If the closing non-UEB passage indicator could be misread as a symbol within that non-UEB code, for instance, if we used the well, actually, I can't think of an example. That's why this whole rule seems very complicated. But if the closing non-UEB passage indicator could be misread as a symbol within that non-UEB code, use an opening non-UEB passage indicator with the identifier for English, which is EN. If even that would be misread, then the transcriber can just make something up to show that, by the way, UEB is now resuming. So in other words, instead of closing that non-UEB code, then you just start up English without actually having closed that code specifically. But again, I really can't imagine that this would happen, but it must have occurred to somebody because there's the rule. Moving on to International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA for short. IPA has its own identifiers, whether you're in IPA or in just regular narrative text, so we should use those symbols for that. International Phonetic Alphabet is already international, so UEB is not touching it. Transcribe IPA slashes and brackets where you see them. If there are no slashes or brackets around IPA symbols, then use the general IPA code switch indicators that were in the list on just the previous screen. Music code also has its own indicators for switching in and out of music and text, and so we're just going to use the music code symbols. Again, music code is already international, and so we're not messing with it with UEB. The surrounding text around the music, though, I believe will be in UEB. So follow the provisions of the new International Manual of Braille Music Notation to determine when this switching is needed. So you're following music code with that. The opening music indicator is preceded by a space and placed immediately before the musical notation. So an example of that would just be the key signature is 3 flats, and so that is the symbol then saying that we're starting music code .63. And now we'll talk a bit about Nemeth. First of all, don't follow UEB if you are going to use Nemeth. Don't follow UEB symbols and don't follow the rules that talk about Nemeth in the UEB codebook. Instead, we should go to Guidance for Transcription using the Nemeth code within UEB context. That is an official document from BANA. You can get it from their website, and it's available in PDF and BRF formats. Very simply, the basic concept is we do not use contractions at all in Nemeth mode. So all those rules about when we could or could not use contractions in Nemeth have gone by the wayside. We're just not going to use contractions at all. The surrounding text, however, that is not mathematical will be in UEB. And yes, sometimes there is some gray area or some confusion, but that's the general principle. The code switch indicators then are dots 456, 146 for opening Nemeth code. We follow that by a space. And then closing the terminator, we precede it with a space and then use dots 456 and then 156. There's also something new that we are using. It's called a one-word switch, and we'll talk a bit about that in just a moment. So here's an example, print first, solution, and that's a paragraph heading, it's in italics. Then we have a narrative sentence. Again, we group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So that is going to be in UEB. The rest of it is definitely mathematical, so we're going to follow Nemeth code for that if we're in a state or district that uses Nemeth. So here's the SimBraille. We can use the UEB word indicator for italics because we're in UEB, it's narrative text. We're going to go ahead and use contractions just as we do anywhere else with UEB. At the end of it, though, you see we have a space and then 456, 146. That's our beginning Nemeth code switch indicator. So now we're in Nemeth. So now we have all of our Nemeth. We follow Nemeth formatting. By the way, even when you're using UEB in a math book or worksheet, we're following Nemeth formatting rules, and even when we're in UEB code. So as you can see, I'll flip back. In print, we had a blocked paragraph with the narrative, but in UEB, we never have blocked paragraphs. We always do 3-1 paragraphs. So that's what we're doing in this case. So we have our math, and then at the very end of it, we have a space, and then our closing Nemeth switch indicator, which is dots 456, and then 156. Another example, some embedded Nemeth within a sentence. The result will be in the form math, comma, where, and then we have some more math, comma, and then a word, and then some more math. So here's where the one-word code switch indicators come into action. So the result will be in the form, and then we have our opening Nemeth indicator there. That's 456, 146, a space. You always have a space afterwards. The math, using math punctuation after the parenthesis. And then after that, we just have one word. Instead of switching in and out of Nemeth and UEB just for one word, the BANA committee decided that we were going to have a one-word switch indicator. So we have dots 6 and then dot 3 for one word. And it only works with one word. You can't just stick this in front of several words. If there are two words, then you do have to switch back into UEB officially and then back into Nemeth. So this only works if there's only one word within some math. And in this case, that word is where. So we have our one-word switch indicator saying, yes, we can, we're back in UEB, so we can go ahead and use the UEB contractions there. If we didn't have that, we would not be able to contract it. Then some more math and another one-word switch indicator for the word and then our final math expression there, a space. We always have a space before the terminating Nemeth indicator. Notice it comes before the period because the period is not part of the math. It's part of the text. So it comes before the punctuation. And one more example with Nemeth. Again, there are many more examples in the official BANA document. I just wanted to touch on a few examples here. So one final example is we have a list of exercises here. We start Nemeth before we get to the exercises. And we can put that indicator on a line by itself so that it doesn't mess up the formatting or the alignment of the exercises. So we put that on a line by itself. And even though the A, B, C, D identifiers are not officially math, instead of switching in and out just for those things, we're just going to keep things simple and put things in Nemeth. So we have the Nemeth code switch indicator, our exercises, and then at the very end we have a space with our terminating Nemeth indicator. So that's 456 and 156. So we had space there, so we're putting that on the line. If we didn't have space there, we could put that on the line by itself as well. Okay, moving on to the next topic, scansion, stress, and tone. These things, it seems to me that they're not fully developed in the UEB code itself. However, because they have some groundwork laid down, I want to mention that. So scansion has to do with poetry analysis, stress has to do with pronunciation, and tone has to do with our voices as far as the English language goes. So whether our voices go up and down, up or down for questions, statements, emphasis, that sort of thing. So we have this section here that talks about scansion, stress, and tone. We also have the UEB section 4 when we talked about letters and their modifiers. We still use those same modifiers for pronunciation marks. They look the same in print, so they are the same in Braille. We can also make use of section 3, which talked about the general symbols and indicators. Okay, scansion first, which is poetry analysis. If you have vertical lines, you follow print. So there is a line indicator. Again, indicators are not present in print. They're for the Braille reader, and we'll talk about those. There's also a vertical line that is in print, or a double vertical line that is in print, a slash or double slash, again, also actually physically there. Follow print for the print sign and the, I believe you pronounce it caesura in poetry. So if the foot sign then are the slashes. So the single slash and then double slash is the caesura. So we follow print just as we see it with italic word indicator for 2, and then capital B, space because it's spaced in print with our slash. Again, italic word for or, capital not for the whole word, capital word indicator. Capital word indicators for 2B, slash slash for the caesura sign, and we just keep carrying on as you can see. So the next example uses double vertical lines and it's spaced in print, so we use our double vertical line with spaces in Braille as well. When the line-by-line format of print, as in a poem, is changed to a linear format in Braille, use the line indicator to mark the Braille breaks between poetic lines. The line indicator is unspaced from the preceding poetic line, but has a space after it before the following poetic line. So let's look at that. Here's a verse, and in print it's a mad kingfisher, one line. The next line starts with rocketing about in the next line, red fog at sunrise. So for whatever reason we decided we're not going to follow print and break the lines where they are. We're going to continue on and braille it all in one long line. So we have a mad kingfisher, and we need to show that line is now ended with a Braille indicator. Again, the line does not exist in print. So that Braille indicator, that's 456, is unspaced from the previous line, but spaced from the next line. And then we get to rocketing about in the, and again, it's unspaced from the previous line, and there would be a space if it wasn't at the line break there before the next line, red fog at sunrise. Now the UEB codebook, again, it has nothing to do with formatting, or shouldn't, and it shows the attribution Malcolm Lowry as being in cell 1. But BANA says that we should have those sorts of things, attributions, put 4 cells to the right of the previous line. So that would put it in cell 5 in this case. Moving on now to stress. And stress has two symbols, one for primary stress sign. It looks like a little prime sign that's in bold, it's strong. And the secondary stress sign, which is also like a little prime sign, but it's regular typeface, not bold. We should use those when we see them in print. Otherwise, we should follow print when we see capitals, letter modifiers, change of typeface, or any other symbols written on the line above to indicate stress, either in the syllables of a word or in the words in a phrase, sentence, or poem. So follow print. If you need the stress signs, use these two that are listed on the screen here. There are 3 cells each. A couple of examples of that. Here we have, we're not using those stress symbols, we're using accent marks. So we see accent marks, so that's what we braille in. That's what we braille. So C, the O has a grave accent, I believe it's called, and so that is above, and so we're going to put it previous before the O. The rest of our word, we can use contractions in these pronunciations as long as a letter in that contraction is not accented. So we couldn't use the OU because the O had an accent mark above it, but we can use the ER and IN, and then we have an accent mark above the E. That's the acute accent, so it looks the same in print, so that's what we do in Braille. And to continue on with the rest of the word, and a contraction for ENCE. The next example, commercial, is broken up into syllables, and you can see the second syllable has boldface to indicate stress, and it also has a little caret above the U. So we have our regular word brailled in UEB, and then our square bracket. K, schwa, there are spaces in between the syllables, so that's what we do in Braille. We don't stick in hyphens for everything like we did with EBAE. Whatever we see between syllables is what we do in Braille. So we have our schwa, a space, and then our boldface word indicator there, just like we do with any other UEB text, M, and then our little caret, which is above the U in print, so we put it before the U in Braille. And then a space between the next syllable. We can use the SH contraction because there aren't any accents above the S or H, our schwa, and L, and then our closing square bracket. Another instance you might see stress being used is in poetry. And so here we have a poetry analysis going on with the stress of the rhythm of the poetic line. And here's the Braille according to the new formats guidelines that will be coming out very soon. This is not the way UEB shows it, so the rulebook shows it very differently. It shows the stress marks before the syllables to which they apply. But in the new formats, what is being taught is to braille the poem twice. First, you're just going to braille it as is in regular UEB using contractions, the symbols for line breaks, follow print, whatever you need to do. Also in UEB, you should notice that the attribution, the name for the poem is also in the left margin in cell 1. Braille format says to put it 4 cells to the right of the line above, so in this case we are moving the name Charles Kingsley way over to cell 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because it's 4 cells to the right of the line above it. So we braille the poem first, just as is, with regular UEB contractions. Then we braille the second time, uncontracted, and using the line above it to show the stress marks. So we're not including the stress marks within the poetic line. They go directly above the syllable to which they apply, and it's okay if they don't have spaces in between them, if there are more than one in a word. So this is how you would do it in UEB according to the new Braille formats guidelines that will be coming out. For pronunciation, we use the primary and secondary stress signs that we looked at just a few screens ago, and follow print placements. So if the marks come before a syllable, that's where we braille them. If they come after the syllable, that's where we braille them. Describe what print sign is used on the special symbols page or in a transcriber's note. So here we have the word apprehension, and we have AP with the secondary stress first on the AP, the first syllable there. So we have AP, secondary stress syllable, space before the next syllable because that's what's in print. And then we have the syllable for hen. We can use the contraction there with the stress syllable there because this isn't a modifier, it's just a stress mark, so we can use the contraction there. Space, SH, schwa, N. And then we have our regular word in UEB in parentheses. Tone, as I said, is when you're showing what your voice is doing in a language. So we follow print when capitals or a change of typeface are used to indicate tonal patterns of speech, as in text for learners of English as a second language. For other modes indicating tone, including arrows and position, use the tone symbols in this section. And I'm not going to go into that at all. Way too detailed, even more than what we've talked about so far. So if you should ever need to do tone representation, there are some examples in the codebook in section 15. And that completes our course. We have one final homework assignment for you to try. It's an overview of the entire course. Congratulations on making it through. See you later. Bye.